Okay, so now we're going to work on coding apples and bananas. As normal, I'm going to suggest you start with the new py. So here in my terminal, I can do an ls, and there is a bin directory right here. And the bin directory is my new py, so from here I can say bin new py. I want to create my program inside the apples and bananas directory, and it needs to be called apples.py. Great. Now I have my new program. We can run the program. I like to go into the directory and I can just run it as apples, and it has all the default arguments for new py. We know that this program needs to take a single positional argument and a named optional argument. Let's change the description here to something a little more reasonable. Apples and bananas is fine. And the positional argument is going to be a bit of text. We don't know if that text is going to be just text from the command line or text from a file. We're going to figure that out in just a moment. Here we're going to change the help to input text is fine, or file. We know that it needs an optional string argument. The short flag is going to be -v, the long flag is --vowel, and this will be the vowel. And it will be a string, and the type is actually a string. The metavar will be string, and we want the default to be A, and we also want to restrict the choices to be A, E, I, O, or U. Now, choices wants a list, and we are passing here a string, but there's a little bit of magic that happens. Python will magically coerce this string into a list because that's the thing that is expected for choices. We can check that in just a moment. Here we can get rid of these arguments. We don't need them. We also don't need this flag. And so now we have some text and an optional vowel. And so I will assign those to a couple variables here. And I don't need these. And I can just print out that the text is this value and the vowel is this value. And this is just getting started. This is just to make sure that my program actually does something sane. So here, let's run it. Let's run it again with no arguments. That looks like a pretty good. So first off, it runs. It runs and it actually compiles. So that's good. It also seems to create the correct help documentation, which is great. Let's actually pass it some text. Foo. Great. The text is set to foo and the vowel is set to A. Let's give it a bad vowel argument like T. Fantastic. It has been rejected as an invalid choice, and all that happened because of the choices here. And it's even spelling out that we need to choose from the single characters A, E, I, O, U. So, if I pass in A, E, I, O, U, that's not, actually that is acceptable, isn't it? Well, that was a little surprising. Anyway, we're going to keep going, pretend that didn't happen. So, okay, so now we have verified that we can get some text, but if we pass in apples and we pass in the inputs fox, it is still reading that just as a literal string instead of reading the file. So we need to go steal that bit of logic that we used before in, I believe Howler was the first place that we used it, and where we intercept the arguments here. And we need to remember that the last thing to happen here is that we're going to return those arguments. But in the meantime, we're going to fix them up just a little bit. We're going to see if the os.path is file returns true for args.text, then what we want to do is to rewrite args.text with the value of opening that args.text and reading it. And we can also strip off any white space off the end just to clean that up. And now if we run this, Now it shows us that the text is the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, and the vowel is A. And I can verify that I can change the vowel to, say, I. And that's what's going to be changed. So that's the setup, and that's our basic program that's working. And we're getting the inputs, and they've been validated. And so we can go from this point. I can leave that information right there for now. And I can come back later and delete it. If we wanted to run our test right now, we would see that we're going to be passing the fact that this exists, that it does create a usage statement, that it does reject a bad vowel, and then it's failing here on the command line where it's asserting that the text should be foo, and the vowel it's a. It should be spitting out fa, and right now it's actually spitting out. It wants to see fa, and what it's seeing right now is text equal foo and vowel equal a. So we need to make this spit out fa when it's given foo and a vowel of a. So how can we do that? The first way that I suggested that you solve this would be to iterate over each character for char in text. And then you would do something with that. And in the introduction, I showed you how to uppercase each character. And in order to do that, we have to create, like, say, something new, some new bit of text that's going to be held. It could be a new string, or it could also be a list. Either way is fine, whatever you're comfortable doing. Let's just, for the moment, I'll just choose a new string that I'm going to create. And given this character, let's just for the moment, let's just print the character and see what that prints. Let's go down here and run with just with foo. Let's see, do we need to save that? There we go. Okay, so if we run this bit of code where for each character we just want to print that character, then it's printing F and then O and then O. We need a way to know, is this character a vowel? We could, for instance, say char in A-E-I-O-U. And we save that, then run this. Then we see that F is not a vowel, then O is a vowel, and O is a vowel. That's great. But what happens if we run this with uppercase text? It's showing false for everything. So we're going to need to think about a way to handle both upper or lower case. Let's just handle them each individually. So for now, let's say if the character, let's just handle the lowercase version. If the character is A, E, I, O, or U, then what we want to append to the new is going to be the vowel character. So that vowel character had to be a lowercase, A-E-I-O-U. So if this character that we're looking at is also a lowercase, then what we want is to, instead of using the character, we want to use the vowel. And then we can handle the uppercase version. If it is an uppercase vowel, A-E-I-O-U, then what we want to append is the vowel dot upper. And then the fallback condition is that we want to use the character itself. And now we have this new string, and we can print new. Let's see if that works. Let's run it with foo. Let's run it with big foo. Great. Let's get rid of this debugging, and let's run it with foo. Let's run our test and see how we're doing. That passes all of our tests. So it passes one where we pass in the text on the command line, and then we pass in an optional vowel, make sure that we preserve the case, upper and lower case, and then we do the same kinds of things using a file input. So that is one version that will pass our test suite. I'm just going to show you here that I could do almost the exact same thing using a list, and this is still the same syntax for adding this vowel to this list called new. And then at the end, what's going to change here is if I run it, let's save it. If I run it right now the way it is, it's going to print out a literal list, which is not what we want. We want it to print joining that list on the empty string to create a new string. And if we run that, it prints out what we want. So if I run test on that, that also works. So strings and lists, very much interchangeable, and that is the first method that I would like to show you. And if we go look here at solution 1, that is pretty much exactly the way I wrote that. Here I'm using the new text.append method, which is pretty much the same syntax as plus equal, whichever one you're comfortable with. Plus equal works for both lists and for strings. That is one way to write this, and I will show you a couple more ways to write this in just a moment.